Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see all these pretty smiling faces this morning. We're in Luke chapter 6 today. If you'll go ahead and turn in your Bibles. We have a few families that are traveling, probably more than that. I know the Taylors are gone, and the Atkins are gone, and the Spurlocks are gone, so that's 6 people. And I don't see Henry. Anybody know about Henry? I could check on her because she's always faithfully here, usually here by this time anyway. I see Fern got the memo, and you got part of the memo from wearing green today as we celebrate one of the best golf tournaments ever, the Masters, right? Like none others, what they say on the commercial, and they wear green. And we're going to celebrate today as we look into Luke chapter 6, the Master.
Amen.
So we should be celebrating the Masters, not just the golf tournament every day. We should be celebrating the Master every day, right? So with that being said, you've got your prayer list in front of you here. And again, as always, it's extensive. If you want to make a copy of it, shoot it with your phone. I do send out, I try to, and it takes a little bit of time, as you can imagine, because there's like 50 or 60 of you all. And I send you a text weekly. If you're not getting that text and you do have a cell phone, come and see me after class and give me your number so that I can include you on that list so that you can receive the texts I send out. And of course, if you don't want to receive the text that I send out, come and see me so I can take you off the list that I send the text out to. Okay? And I was thinking as I was driving here this morning that our prayer list, I was going in my head, I was saying, our prayer list is always extensive. And it's hard, it's really, quite frankly, it's hard to pray for each one of these names individually. And we're going to find out, like when I left this morning and I started praying from the house to the church, and I prayed all the way from the house to the church. It's like a 30-some minute drive, maybe 40-minute drive. I guess my son
He's calling you back.
Sunday school class this morning. I'll change that real quick. So anyway, here I am praying on my way down here to church, and I'm thinking of this massive prayer list that we have, and I can't even get it included. I just, in general, pray for the prayer list. Yeah. And then I'm thinking, how massive is the list that God looks at every day?
Right.
Think about that.
Right.
This is our list.
Yeah.
How many lists look like this list multiplied by millions and millions? And yet, He cares for each need. He knows each situation. Mind-boggling, isn't it? That's the God that we serve.
Right.
And we're going to find out about that God this morning because we are in the region of Galilee, and unfortunately, there's been some bombing. Where's my pen? Oh, there it is. There's been some bombing, been shot by Iran and Iraq and Yemen, evidently, sending over about 300 drones and trying to hit into Israel, and they evidently destroyed most of them, which is great. But you always have that fear that some of them doesn't get shot down, and you hate to be under attack all the time. Can you imagine from the time that Israel became a nation? Well, effectively, it became a nation recognized by the world in 1947, in May 1947. But prior to that, when God told Abraham, I'm going to give you this land, right? And this land was this land here. And you were going to be able to occupy it. And yet, they still have not been able to occupy the land that God told them they were going to occupy. This portion of Israel is not what's in the Bible. It extends much further over this way. It goes east. And yet they still can't occupy it. There's always the fraction that wants to take them out. We're going to talk about that here in some of the woes. and some of the blessings that we want to look at this morning. So we have these guys here, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. You just can't please some people, you know it? Some people are just too smart, as they say, they're too smart for their britches. These guys were too smart for their britches. You know, they wanted all the claim and all the fame. And so they were going to take it at whatever cost. So let's just read a portion of this, and we're going to go back and we're going to kind of do a little chemistry class this morning. We'll do this, we do sometimes, we'll dissect the text, right? So let's go to chapter 6. Now it came about that on a certain Sabbath, that he was passing through some grain fields, and his disciples were picking and eating the heads of the grain, rubbing them in their hands. And some of the Pharisees said, "Why do you do what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And Jesus answered them, "Have you not read what David, when he was," let me try that again. And Jesus answered them, said, "Have you not even read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, when he entered the house of God, and he took and ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for anyone to eat except for the priest alone, and he gave it to his companions. And he was saying to them, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." So that's our title here. We're going to get to this in just a second. And this is the Sermon on the Plain. And there's some confusion whether the Sermon on the Plain is the same thing as we had of the Beatitudes in Matthew, right? So we're going to talk about that in a second.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did the Pharisees have drones where they were watching whatever Jesus did? They seem to pop up everywhere when he
Seems like
does
it popped
something.
up. We're going to get to that here in just a minute.
Especially on the Sabbath.
So let's talk about this. Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days shall thou labor and do all thy work. But on the 7th day is the Sabbath day of the Lord of thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy maidservant, nor thy a manservant, I got those reversed, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and he hallowed it. So there's where we're getting the Sabbath day. When is the Sabbath day? Is the day of the Sabbath day? No, it's not. The Sabbath day starts at dawn on Friday, and it continues for 24 hours till dawn on Saturday. And the first time I went over to Israel in 2018, I think I told you this story, but if you're like me, you don't remember it, so it might be new again. I was so hungry over there because they feed you like kings. You know, they put out a buffet. I'm a buffet kind of guy. Like my wife is like, we ain't going to no buffet because she works at the health department. And I'm like, give me a buffet because then I can pick and choose what I want. If I like it, I can go back and get more, right? And so we had all these dinners that you could go and get all you want. And I was thinking that the next morning, sometimes they fix eggs. And sometimes you can get some toast and go with it, and usually there's a lot of fruit, lots of fruits over there in the Middle East. And so I was hungry for something to get for breakfast, so like I wake up. Bacon. They don't serve bacon. I don't remember ever getting bacon or sausage or anything like that, which was a disappointment. But I got up there, although I love the omelets. They make good omelets. And so I got up early in the morning, I went downstairs, and I noticed there wasn't as many people down in the cafeteria as normal. And I'm looking around at the buffet, and I'm looking, where's all the hot trays? And I see like some boxes and some pitchers, and it had cereal. I'm like, what's the deal? And they're like, nobody works. I mean, what do you mean nobody works? This is a Sabbath. Sabbath. Don't you realize I traveled 11 hours to get over here? I'm ready for breakfast. And it dawned on me, you know, the Sabbath, they shut everything down. You know, the workers are gone. Here's your cereal. Good luck, buddy. You can eat good this evening, but you're not going to eat good for breakfast and lunch. That's what happens. So check this out. We got Jesus and his disciples walking through a wheat field. So this is not unusual. We talked about this. We're around the Sea of Galilee, this Galilean region. This is where Jesus spent about 3 years of his ministry in this area, the majority of it, as you know, and he's walking through some wheat fields, and he has his disciples with him. Guess what? He didn't have the 12 disciples with him. He had disciples with him. He had like this whole room or more, because he hasn't chosen the disciples yet. Not the 12. We'll get to that in just a minute. So they're walking through here, and they're hungry. So they're walking through here, and they pick up a little bit of wheat, and they tear off the head of it, and then they rub it in their hands, and then they blow off the chaff. So then what they have the seeds. Trail mix. That's where trail mix came from. It came from right here. And so they had them a little snack. And the irony of it is what you had just alluded to. Why were these Pharisees and Sadducees walking with them through the wheat fields? Because here's when it says here, they question him. It's like, Jesus, why are your disciples eating on the Sabbath? So why are they doing that? We have some really stupid laws. We have some laws in Huntington. I remember when I was growing up, I don't know if this is true or not, they said you wasn't allowed to spit on the street because it was the city ordinance. It was the law, you couldn't spit on the street. But when I was young, we chewed gum, we spit on the street all the time. So I evidently was a lawbreaker. And we know that the Levites, after Moses went up on what mountain to get the commandments? Sinai. He went up on Mount Sinai to get the 10 commandments that God gave to him. And then from there, the Levites said, you know what, we need to expand these commandments a little bit so everybody knows what they really mean. So we just incorporated 613 more. So part of these 613 more were their versions. I mean, they made them explicit. They made them for the do's and the don'ts. These are the new rules. These do's and don'ts that they're going to give to you explain these 613. So in this case, these guys, they broke 4 laws. What 4 laws did they break? Well, first thing they did is they picked. That was work. Are you kidding me? They picked off the head of wheat. Okay, that was one. And then they took it, and then they rubbed it together. That was work.
To make it.
You can imagine, I like mowing the grass on Sunday. People will probably come up my house and say, you're such a sinner. And I'm like, I love mowing grass. This is therapy for me. If it needs mowed, I'll mow on the moon at midnight. I just like that stuff. But this is what they said. That was the sin. And then after they rubbed it together, they blew it off. And they got the chaff off from it. That was another sin. And then, daggone it, they went to one extreme. They even ate the product. Terrible. These guys just were out to get Jesus. We knew this. It didn't surprise Jesus. Jesus knew this all along. To us, we're thinking, how in the world do these people do this? And Jesus is like, this is all part of my plan. This is why I came. Because I came to save the sinners, right? The lost. I didn't come to treat the ones who were righteous. I came to treat the sinners. And if you think about it, we have another stupid situation that happened back in Samuel. We have King Saul. And King Saul, of course, was our first king that the Israelites had to mandate that they had one like all the neighboring nations. They wanted a king, right? So God gave him King Saul. I said, I'll give you a king. But when you have this king, he's going to give all these rules, and you're going to have to abide by his rules. He's going to take your kids, he's going to put them to work, he's going to take your fields, he's going to take a percentage of your profits, all this other stuff. And they're like, sign us up. We'll take it. They said, okay. So they got King Saul, right? And King Saul gets in a battle with the Philistines. And he keeps fighting these Philistines. And as long as God's with them, they win. And when God's not with them, they don't win. And that's the same way with us. Sometimes we try to take battles on them by ourselves. We can't do it. We need to have God with us. And what happened was these Philistines were so enormous in number, and they were afraid, the Israelites were afraid, what are we going to do, God? And let's pray about this. Let's bring in a priest. We need an answer whether we can attack and whether we'll win or not. And God wasn't giving them the answer. And what's his son do? Jonathan. He goes off, remember? He goes off with his servant. and he goes out and he kind of spies out this regiment of Philistines over here, and we know later on there's like 20 some of them that's over here, and he says, you know, I think we can go down and take these guys. They were right in two cliffs, and he says, you think we can? Then I'm with you. He said, okay, let's go down and let's take them on. If they tell us, hey, come over here, we'll fight you, that means that we can take them. And if they say, stay there and we'll come to you, that's a bad sign. And what they do, they recognize themselves to the Philistines, and the Philistines say, come on over here so we can fight you. You've been hiding in holes, you're scared of us. They went over there and they killed 20 some of them. Every one of them that was there. And word got out that the Philistines were losing. And then the other Philistines started getting petrified. And they started running. And then Israel found out, Saul found out about it. And they started to attack. And as they were attacking, they were running through there, trying to chase them down, trying to chase them all down. And it was a long day. And here's Jonathan with his boys, and they're walking through the field. And what's Jonathan do? He takes his staff, and he dips it down. He finds some honey. And he takes some honey. Bit of honey. First bit of honey. First bit of honey in the Bible. And they loved it. And it gave them a little bit of nourishment. Who, if you're not tired, does not try to refresh himself? Turn on the TV. Watch any sports channel. You're going to get a Gatorade commercial or some kind of a sports drink or something that you're going to take to refuel yourself for the mission, right? They were refueling themselves for the mission. Jonathan was. And what was the word that was passed out? Saul said, stupid law. Nobody's allowed to eat or drink until we chase these Philistines all the way down and kill every one of them. And whoever does that, and they break my rule, they're going to die. I don't care who it is, even if it's my son. I think he said that in jest, but he didn't realize after the fact that they continued to fight, and they were like, well, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with our camp. What happened? And they said, well, evidently we need to take lots and find out what it was. And they ended up taking lots, and they came down to Saul, and they came down to Jonathan. And then they came down to Jonathan. And Saul said to Jonathan, what have you done? He said, I took a little bit of honey on my staff, and I ate it. And he said, as sure as I'm standing here today, I'm paraphrasing, you're going to die because you did this. You broke my rule. He's ready to kill his own son. Now, is that a stupid law? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, the people that was with Jonathan realized it was a stupid law and told Saul, no, you're not going to kill him today. The only reason you won today is because of Jonathan in the first place. So we come over here, and we got guys walking through a field, and there's a stupid law that says you can't pick up wheat and eat the top of the heads and eat the seeds. Stupid law.
Hey, Mark.
Made by the Levites.
The answer to her question is Pharisees and Sadducees were always in the group because Christ was, they thought, could be the Messiah that they've been looking for, and everybody was following him, and they've been looking, and there was always Antichrist that came onto the scene. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were a part of the group and a part of the people who were continually following Jesus, and so it wasn't any, they didn't just show up. They were always there.
Well, yes and no. What the Pharisees and Sadducees were supposed to do by law was they were supposed to make sure that their people, the Israelites, the Jews, were protected from those who were were given the wrong word. So they were supposed to make sure that Jesus was in fact given the correct word. And now we find out that Jesus is basically claiming himself as God and the Son of Man, the Son of God. And they're like, you're blasphemy, and that's why they're following him. And they're trying to trip him up. They're on a mission to trip him up. And of course, again, this is the whole master plan of God. That's why he sent Jesus down here in the first place. You know that when they're up here in heaven, the whole plan was there before him. Nothing that Jesus is doing is shocking to him. He didn't wake up this morning and says, oh my gosh, I'm being trailed by the Pharisees and Sadducees today. He knew this was going to happen. This is part of the master plan. This is a big piece of puzzle coming together.
Of course, they questioned him on everything.
They question him on everything. So, let's get back here to where we're at. And he said here, what about David? He said when he was hungry, those who were with him, what about King David? We didn't talk about King David. King David is right, he's up on the top of the pinnacle with the Jews, right? Everything goes back to David and goes back to Moses. And what happened with David? David was running from Saul, and he went to Nob to see Elimelech, the priest, and he said, hey, I've been sent by the king. He wasn't sent by the king. He was running. He says, I've been sent by the king on a mission, and he says, I need to see if you have any food. And do you have any weapons? Because I had to leave quickly, and I couldn't bring my weapons with me. Well, that was a little fudge. He didn't have to leave quickly because he was on the run from Saul. But he didn't have his weapon. And what did Amalek say? He says, I'll tell you what, I have this one sword. You might recognize it. It's the one that Goliath had, that you used to cut off his head. You're welcome to it. I've had it ever since. And David said, I'll take it. He says, but I need some food for me and my men. He goes, we don't have any food. He goes, well, what about that bread? Well, this is show bread. This is consecrated bread. This is just for the priests. There's 12 cakes here. They make bread all the time, every week, and they put it out. And what they don't eat, they get rid of. But it's for the priest. He says, well, we'll take it. He says, well, you can't, if you eat it, you know, I guess you can have it, but that's unlawful. Jesus says right here, he ate it, it was unlawful. So Jesus is saying to these Sadducees and these Pharisees, you're going to blame me for eating on a Sabbath when this guy that you put up here on a pinnacle broke the law and you don't condemn him? Hypocrites, right? That's what he's saying. You can't be a hypocrite against me. And then he has the audacity. Oh my goodness. Verse 5. And he said to them, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. What's that saying? He made the Sabbath. He is the Sabbath. He wrote the Sabbath. He was there when God gave the 10 Commandments. This is all part of him. And then we go down to verse 6. And it came about on another Sabbath where the second, you know, this is it's really funny how these Sabbaths go one after another. That happens every 7 days. And it came about on another Sabbath that he entered the synagogue, and he was teaching, and there was a man whose right hand was withered. Now it's interesting that, you know, Luke, Dr. Luke, he is a perfectionist as far as preparing himself and trying to give his message to his audience. He says it was his right hand. So most people, who in here is left-handed? Raise your hand. Okay, we have 3. 4. We have 4 out of 40. I'm not a mathematician, so that's not a very big percentage. And consequently, that's the point with this. He's right-handed, which probably means that he would make his living based upon using, you know, his limbs. And if his predominant hand, which is probably his right hand, wasn't there, he wasn't able to make a living. He wasn't able to do his work. And it says here, and the scribes and the Pharisees were watching him closely to see if he healed on the Sabbath in order that they might find reason to accuse him. Again, this is part of the master plan. But he knew what they were thinking. Remember that? Nathaniel, I see you over there underneath that tree. And Nathaniel was like, you weren't even there. I know, but I know what you're thinking. I'm omniscient. I know all these things. And he says, I knew what you were thinking. And he said to the man with the withered hand, rise and come forward. And he rose and he came forward. And Jesus said to them, I ask you, is it lawful on a Sabbath to do good or to do harm? So let's look at this for a second. I forgot to go back to this. When thou comest into thy standing corn of thy neighbor, then thou may pluckest it, the ears of, with thy hand, but thou shalt not move a sickle into the neighbor's standing corn. There was a law in Deuteronomy that said that you were allowed, if you were passing through somebody's field, you were allowed to take some excess. Okay? You couldn't take your big pot of stuff, a big basket, and hoard a bunch of their crop. But you could take some when you were traveling through. So what they did was not a sin. What they did in their eyes was a sin was they did it on the wrong day. They did it on the Sabbath day. Okay? And we talked about this, so the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread except for the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. That was back in 1 Samuel. And then we have that, here's another dumb result of this thing. And I wanted to mention this. So the king ordered Doeg, you turn and strike down the priest. Who was the priest? The priest was Elimelech. Saul calls Elimelech in. He says, hey, what's the deal? You let David come in and you fed him and you gave him weapons. Yeah, I gave him the sword of David. And of course, Amalek was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He basically said, I didn't do anything wrong. And Saul said, you did do something wrong. You abated him and you provided for him, so therefore I'm going to kill you and all the priests that are with you. And so 85 priests were killed that day. By who? By Doeg. Because Saul's army was like, oh, we're not going to do this. We're not going to kill these priests. And Saul turns around to Doeg and says, you do it. And so he wants brownie points. So what's he do? He kills them. And not only does he kill them, they leave there and they go to Nob, where they were from, and they killed all the women and the children in Nob. Why? Because what David did. King David, up here at the top, his actions. He wasn't just responsible for one man's death because of Bathsheba. We got 85 that he's responsible for, plus the whole city that he's responsible for. And I said that he was Lord of the Sabbath. Sorry, I wasn't up there. And here's a silly thing that they say too, because you know what they would have done. That the Pharisees would have had a sheep or a calf that had fallen into a well or got stuck in the creek. You think they're going to leave it there and die? They're not going to leave it there and die. They're going to take care of it. And that's why I say some of these things were just silly that they were talking about. And this was, of course, Jonathan being accused by Saul. Didn't get caught up there. All right, we'll leave it up that screen there. Let's go back here to where we're at. So Jesus said to him, he said in verse 9, and Jesus said, I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or destroy it? And after looking around at them all, he said to them, stretch out your hand. And he did so. And the hand was restored. Boom. He didn't touch him.
Nope.
Remember he touched a leopard in our last chapter. And you're not supposed to touch a leopard because you could get the infection. Jesus isn't worried about that. He's taking care of the New Samaritan kind of deal, take care of it. And he said, but they said to themselves, they were filled with rage, and they discussed together what they might do to Jesus. Again, plotting to Jesus because he did good on the wrong day. It wasn't that he healed the guy's hand, the withered hand. It wasn't that he healed the leopard. And it wasn't that they ate seeds going through the wheat fields. It's that he did it on the wrong day. It's like, does God rest on Sunday? Does God rest on Saturday? Does he rest Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? He's never resting. If he was never resting, can you imagine the asteroids and the meteorites and everything that would just go havoc and just start destroying things on one day because he's sleeping? That's the same thing as when Elijah was fighting with Ahab, and he had all the prophets of Baal there, and he says, you pray to your prophet, or you pray to your God, and have him send down fire, and I'll pray to my God. And when they prayed, he was like, your God must be sleeping, you need to scream louder, wake him up, yell. Maybe he's on vacation. Maybe he's relieving himself. That's what Elijah said.
Make fun of him.
Yeah, making fun of him. But that's the point. God doesn't rest. The rest was for us. The Sabbath was created for us so that we could replenish ourselves. Okay? And that's what God says. Let's go down here to verse 12. And it was at this time that he went off into the mountain to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer to God. And that kind of leads me down to where I was at this morning. Here I was praying for like 30 to 35 minutes to come here. And, and I'm thinking, that's a long time, but that's not a long time. Jesus prayed for 10 or 12 hours. He didn't stop. And he went up to a mountain to pray. Well, which mountain was it? We don't know. But as I showed you last week, over here on this side of Tiberias, there's a mountain called Mount Arbel, which is the biggest mountain over there. Might that have been the one he went to pray to? I mean, he probably went for some seclusion. Why was he going for some seclusion? Because he had a lot of things on his mind. He knew what was coming up. He knew what he was getting ready to do. He knows the master's plan because he had it laid out to him before he left. He knew he came down here to die. How many of us are born to die? We're all going to die. But that was his mission. He was born to die. And when he came, he called his disciples to him, and he chose 12 of them, whom he also named his apostles. Okay, there we go. There's a multitude. There's the difference between the Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon on the Plain. The Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is down in the water, and he gets out of the water, and he walks up to the mountain, and he sits down, and he gives a discourse. Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Sermon on the Plain, he's up on the mountain, and he comes down from the mountain, and he meets his disciples, and he names them. So most theologians say this is a different occurrence. It's not the same occurrence. Now you can say, well, they have all these blessings in them, and they have all these roses. Well, yes. That doesn't mean that Jesus didn't say these multiple times. Pastor Trent has repeatedly said this, and he feels that he gave the Sermon on the Mount multiple times throughout the region of Galilee. You know, you got a good sermon, use it. When it works, use it. And then it says here that he named them. They were also called apostles. Well, the disciples are the ones who follow, right? And the apostles are the ones he's going to send. So he's going to send, out of these disciples, he's going to send 12 of them. And you might say, these 12 people, how much notoriety do they have? Well, let's say the names of them here. We have Simon, who's also named Peter, Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Simon, who is called the Zealot, and Judas, the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. So we got 12 of them. What do you know about Bartholomew? Very little. You know, we only know basically about Peter, James, and John for the most part. They're like the ones who seem to be the leaders of the group, and the leader of the group is Peter. We're going to get to that in a second. And it says here that, and he descended with them and stood on a level place, and there was a great multitude of his disciples, and a great throng of people from around Judea and Jerusalem and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon. And it says here in Matthew 5:1, this is a difference. I think I told you that he went up to the mountain, and then here in Luke, he goes down from the mountain to speak to them, okay? And the difference between the disciples, we just talked about that. One was following and one that is sent. And then we're going to go here to his actual Beatitudes. And it says at verse 18, who had come to hear and to be healed of their diseases, and those who were troubled with unclean spirits and were being cured. And all the multitudes were trying to touch him, for power was coming from him and healing them all. Can you imagine? I know you've been in the grocery store, you've been in a concert, you've been in a game, you've been in some situation where there's been a multitude of people. And I don't know about you, but when people start pressing up against you, first thing I'm thinking is, where's my wallet?
Yeah.
Because I think I'm in New York, and I'm going to be pickpocketed. And I'm thinking, I don't want that. So, you know, when you're traveling, most of us, you know, when we go like this, we put our wallet in our front pocket, because most people don't try to get in your front pocket. They try to get in your back pocket. So here's Jesus, and he's got thousands of people following him, and they want to touch him. That's a little eerie. That's a little scary, you know, to be in that situation. And it says that power was in him, and power was going from him to other people. We know that there was a lady that was hemorrhaging before, and all she did was she reached out and touched his garment, and she was healed. Wow. Right?
And he did it.
And we know that he has that kind of power. And here was people from all these different regions coming to him, and he was healing them all. He wasn't saying, I'll heal you today, you come back next week. I'll heal you today, you come back in 2 weeks. He was healing them all. That's why they were coming to him. And while they was coming to him, he says, I've got my audience now. This is like the appetizer before the main course. And the main course is, now I'm going to give them my message. I'm gonna give him my sermon. And he starts it, right here. And he says, and turning his gaze upon his disciples, he began to say, Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry, for now you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep, now you shall laugh. Blessed are you when men hate you and ostracize you and cast insults at you and spurn in your name as evil for the sake of the Son. Be glad in that day, leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven, for the same way their fathers used to treat the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you are receiving your comfort in full. Woe to you who are well fed now, and you shall be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, and you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for in the same way their fathers used to treat the false prophets. So here we have a compare and contrast. This is basically what it amounts to. Blessed are you who are poor. What do poor people typically have to do? They're dependent. They're dependent because they're poor. They don't have the means to take care of themselves. They have to depend on somebody else. Guess who we have to depend on? We have to depend on our Lord and Savior. Because we can't take care of ourselves. John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. You have to have Jesus in your life or you don't get in. He's your ticket. And this is part of what he's saying. Blessed are you who are poor. It doesn't mean you are poor financially. It has nothing to do with your money situation. And then it goes down here. Blessed are you who are hungry. Well, if you're hungry, what are you doing? You're looking for something to eat. You're wanting something. You're looking for something. Well, that's what he wants you to do. He wants you to look for his word. He wants you to seek out his word. Hunger and thirst on it. Blessed are you when men hate you and ostracize you and cast insults you and spurn your name as evil for the sake of the Son of the God. Jesus said if they hate me, they're going to hate you. Because I'm different. You know, you're salt and light. What do you put salt on for? You put salt on something to change its taste, right? What do you turn the light on? When the light comes on, it exposes everything in the room. If you're salt and light, you're going to be different than somebody else. If you're the light, you're going to expose something else. You may expose their sins. That's supposed to be a blessing. But woe to you who are rich, for you're receiving your comfort in full. We already have the story. Well, we know the story of the young rich man that came to Jesus and said, how can I get in? He goes, well, leave everything you have and follow me. He goes, I can't do that. I got too much. Well, your comfort, you've got it now. What do you who are well fed now? You shall be hungry. Well, if you've got all you need now and you don't think you need Jesus, which a lot of people do, you get what you have. This is all you get. And it says, woe to you when men speak well of you, for the same as their fathers used to treat the false prophets. You know, it's not about what name you have. It's what you do with what you got. And then it says now, we got these rules, there's 7 commands down here. But I say to you who hear, love your neighbors and do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you and pray for those who mistreat you. Whoever hits you on a cheek, offer him the other. And whoever takes away your coat, do not withhold your shirt from him either. Give to everyone who asks of you, and whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. And just as you want people to treat you, treat them in the same way. And if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners in order to receive back the same amount. But love, this is the key, verse 35, but love your enemies and do good, lend expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be the sons of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and evil men. Be merciful, as your Father is merciful, and do not judge, and you will not be judged, and do not condemn, and you will not be condemned or pardoned, and you will be pardoned, Give, and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, they will pour unto your lap for your standard, this is the key, for by your standard of measure it will be measured to you in return. So do unto others as you want done unto you, right? That's basically what he's saying here. Do unto others what you want done unto you. And then he also spoke a parable to them. It says this: a blind man cannot lead a blind man, can he? For they were will they not both fall into a pit? A pupil is not above the teacher, but everyone, after he has been fully trained, will be like his teacher. Case in point, disciples, when I'm done with you in 3 years, you're going to be prepared to carry on the rest of the ministry. I'm prepping you guys. This is all he's saying. All this stuff is for the disciples, because he knows, look guys, in three years, you're getting my keys to my Mercedes. You know, it's yours. You got to take the mission and go with it. And why do you look at the speck that's in your brother's eye and you do not notice the log that's in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take out the speck that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the log that's in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take out the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly, and take out the speck that is in your brother's eye. For there is no tree which produces bad fruit, nor is there nor, on the other hand, a bad tree which produces good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they pick up grapes or briars from a bush. The good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth what is evil, and from his mouth brings forth that which fills his heart. So we have this last thing. It says, and why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do as I say? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and acts upon them, I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building his house, who dug deep and laid a foundation upon the rock. Peter, the rock, which is in Matthew 16:18, build your house upon the rock. I'm the rock. This is Jesus saying that I'm the rock. And he says, and when the flood rose and a torrent burst against that house and could not be shaken, because it was well built. But the one who has heard and has not acted accordingly is like the man who has built his house upon the ground without any foundation. And when the torrent bursts against it, it immediately collapses, and the ruin of that house was great. So we have the blessing and the woes. We've got the poor, the hungry, the weeping, the hated and excluded, and then you have the contradiction. Why? To get in the kingdom, satisfied in the kingdom of God, joyful in the kingdom. Who is the kingdom? Jesus said, I came for the kingdom of God. When he came down here, he is the kingdom. And then we have over here the woes, the rich, the well-fed, the laughing, the spoken. And you know what you get now, if that's what you want, that's all you're going to get. You got one chance in this life to get the second chance. If you don't take it, you know it's on you. It's our job to tell others about it so they don't get there. Because God promises that he who believes in him gets everlasting life. John 3:16, right? We know that. And we also had this story. Remember that story? I don't have the time to tell you this, we'll have to tell it again. Remember the fork story? If you don't remember the fork story, Google the fork story. I'll tell you real quick. We're going to run over a couple minutes. The fork story, I'll sum it up real quick. There's an older lady. She's in the church. She's ready to die. She's getting ready to die. She tells her pastor, she says, Pastor, when I die, I want to be buried in a certain dress. And I want to have this certain flower sitting in my sanctuary at my funeral. And she says, and also, Pastor, while you're there, she says, I want to be buried with the fork in my hand. And the pastor says, why do you want to be buried with the fork in my hand? And she says, well, you remember when we have all these fellowship dinners and somebody will stand up and we'll go through and we'll have this main course, and he says, save your fork. Save your fork, because the best is yet to come. And in their eyes, what was that? That was dessert. The best is yet to come. So she said, when I die, I want to be buried with the fork in my hand. And when the people come up to me at my casket and they ask you, Pastor, why does she have a fork in her hand? She said, I want you to tell them, because she knows the best is yet to come. Right? And that's what God gives us. So, close with this. You are, or what you are, is God's gift to you, and what you become is your gift to God. And that's what Jesus is telling his disciples right here. He chose the ordinary to do the extraordinary. He chose 7 fishermen and a tax collector and a bunch of other people, and one guy that was going to be a traitor right off the bat, because he knew all this stuff. He didn't go out and choose all these scholarly Pharisees and Sadducees because he knew he wasn't going to be able to train them. They wasn't going to listen to him. He picked the guys who was going to listen to him to follow him and to spread the word. That's why you and I are sitting here today. Mission accomplished. Almost. We still have part of the mission. Our mission is to go out to be a PR, professional recruiter, personal recruiter. That's each and every one of you. Share the word, right? All right, next week, we're going to hit chapter 7. Let's close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, again, we thank you so much for today. Just a beautiful day that you blessed us with. And I just pray that we're grateful that we can read your word and try to understand it better. And I pray that we can apply it to our lives in a manner that we can go out and just be a better witness for you. That's the whole goal. Be with us now as we go into the morning worship service. We speak to Trent, that we would have our eyes and hearts and minds and souls open to receive your word, to help equip us to do the mission you want us to do. We love you. We thank you. Forgive us when we fail you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
And